The reality is people need affordable energy. They need reliable energy. We want to have more climate-friendly energy over time. And without that energy, basically people are in economic poverty.
Welcome to Speaking of Business, conversations with innovators, entrepreneurs, and leaders. I'm Goldy Hyder, President and CEO of the Business Council of Canada. A few weeks ago, I was in Asia for the ASEAN and APEC summits. In all my conversations with business leaders and government officials, it was clear that Canada has much to offer this growing and dynamic part of the world. Just think about our agricultural wealth, our critical minerals, and our abundant energy. The question we often wrestle with, however, is how do we get our products across the ocean to willing customers? My guest today has an answer for that. Vern Yu is the president and CEO of AltaGas. Through innovation and outside-the-box thinking, the infrastructure company has managed to deliver Canadian energy to Asia, and it's currently growing its export capacity to reach even more customers. How do they do it? And what can other Canadian companies learn from that experience? I've come to the headquarters of AltaGas in downtown Calgary to find out. Welcome to the podcast, Vern.
Great being here today, Goldie.
Let me establish for our listeners that we're speaking the day after the federal budget, Mark Carney's government's first budget, described as transformational and one for the ages and so forth. Did it meet that moment? Did it meet that high bar it set itself?
Well, that's a great question, Goldie. I think on my first impression of it was that it's a little bit short. We're dealing with is in Canada is we're stagnated with economic growth. And we need to compete globally, and it's becoming obviously harder to compete globally. And in my business, the energy business, we have fierce competition around the world, and we have some of the toughest regulatory processes here in Canada. We have a lot of red tape, and we have tax policy that's not as competitive as other jurisdictions. So if you look at it from our lens, is our biggest competition in Canada for energy exports is the United States. The United States is the biggest exporter of energy in the world, and we want to get our fair share of that pie, and our policies are behind. So there's more to do.
Well, you mentioned the changing global environment in which we're operating. You know, you were born and raised in Canada, from Winnipeg, if I remember correctly. Canada, we had a pretty good run. Do you think what got us to this place is sufficient to get us to where we need to go? And if it isn't, what do we need to do differently?
Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to be proud of our resource sector. It is the biggest contributor to Canada's global exports. It's about 25% of total exports. And I think most Canadians don't know that. I think obviously in Western Canada, we're very aware of the role that the energy business plays in the Canadian economy. But in Central Canada, I think that's lost to the people there. And we need to promote that. And the fact that we have a very prosperous energy business means that we'll have a prosperous Canada. We had that in the 2010s, and we've lost that over the last decade.
Well, the world's certainly a complicated place. I'll come back to that, but I want to kind of pull back to your own story to get some context here. I mentioned you're born in Canada, but your parents immigrated here. Tell me the family story. How did you end up here?
Well, my parents were displaced from China in the late 1940s with the Communist Revolution. They ended up in Taiwan. And from there, they were lucky enough to get a good education and a university education. And then in the early 1960s, when North America was opening up for Asian immigrants, both my parents got an opportunity to go to grad school in North America. My mom went to the U.S. My dad went to Saskatchewan, went to Saskatoon, got a master's degree in engineering at the University of Saskatchewan, and my family ended up in Western Canada, first in Winnipeg, then Regina, then in Calgary in the early 1970s. And we have prospered here in Calgary. We've been part of this growing, vibrant city, and we've had tremendous opportunities for me and my siblings.
You mentioned the education your parents received. You yourself began your career as an engineer, and soon after you completed your MBA in Toronto. What inspired the path that you pursued here? Obviously, engineering as a background helps, but how did you end up doing what you're doing?
Well, as any young person, you're kind of pushed in a direction by your parents. I grew up in the energy business in Calgary. There was a lot of opportunity when I was in my 20s here. And I ended up in Ontario for school, started working out there, and then ultimately got a degree in finance and came back to Calgary because there was more opportunities in the mid-90s in Calgary than there was in Toronto. So from that point in time, never looked back.
Now, you spent 3 decades, I think, at Enbridge, and then I'm assuming you got a call and you explored the opportunity here. Is that how it came about?
Yeah, I think I was lucky. I had a great run at Enbridge. When I started there, the company had a market cap of $3 billion. When I left, it had a market cap of $120 billion. Wow. So I got to work with a lot of great people and learn a lot of things. I had a lot of great mentors. But when I was into my 30th year at Enbridge, I'd pretty much done everything there was to do. The board of directors of AltaGas wanted to make a change at the CEO level, and I thought that this was a great opportunity to try something new and round out my career in just in another different direction.
But it's a big leap, right? Suddenly becoming CEO, responsible for the company, responsible for shareholders, for employees.
Yeah, I think even if you're on the executive team of a big corporation, you think you know what it's like to be CEO, but until you're actually...
You don't until you get it, do you?
Until you actually do the job, you don't realize how alone you are.
Bingo.
And how you're the last line of defense on everything that happens. So it's a big responsibility, but it's also a great challenge.
It's the most common answer. I've felt the same way first time. Where did everybody go? What did I do differently today that I didn't do yesterday? But in that loneliness, of course, you learn a lot more about yourself.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your leadership journey. What have you learned as a CEO?
I think the biggest thing I've learned is you have to bring people along. You can't just assume they know what you're thinking. Oftentimes, what things that are very obvious to you may not be obvious to others. So you have to sit down, explain to the team, if we're going to go a certain direction, why that decision has been made, and what were the pluses and minuses of doing that. And then collectively say, gather everyone up to move in that direction and make sure that we are measuring our progress each and every day on whether we're getting to where we want to get to.
You know, there's a sense out there that's unfortunately developed, and I blame social media for a big part of this, but if it's good for business, it's bad for me. What does business need to do? What do leaders need to do to lean in and lift people up and work together?
Our job as a business is to grow people, to give them more opportunities, encourage our employees to give back to the community, encourage our employees and our company to actually be a good member of society. So one of the things as an infrastructure company that we have to do, which is not unique among businesses, is we have to be a good neighbor. We move a dangerous commodity thousands of miles across oceans, over mountains, in very busy metropolitan cities. And we have to do that safely, reliably, 100% of the time. So we have to be a good neighbor. And by being a good neighbor, you put a face on your company. It isn't just this black box. And that's how I think we have to get people to understand that we're here servicing people so they can have a better life. And yes, we make some money while we do it, but our business is delivering affordable, reliable, and climate-friendly energy to people around the world.
So let's pick up on that. Tell us, the listener, your footprint. Where do you sell to?
We have two main businesses. One is a U.S. business. We own 4 different natural gas utilities. We service customers in Michigan, the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia. So we provide energy to close to 2 million households each and every day that heats their homes, allows people to have a hot shower, to cook their food, and live a quality life. We also have a very significant Canadian business where we're exporting Canadian LPGs to Asia. Today,
LPG, again, let the listener know.
oh, sorry, that's liquefied petroleum gas, which is really propane and butane. And propane's the stuff that heats your barbecue, and butane is a product used in chemicals and in refining.
Now, I was with you. You and I were together in the White House earlier this year. And, the way you landed that message that says all the way from Calgary, we light up 7,000 federal government buildings there. Does that feel pretty good to you?
Well, it's a unique thing that a Canadian company provides the energy that keeps the White House warm.
Yeah. So as you know, we're having a bit of an issue with our neighbors. In business, of course, you're agnostic about those things. You go to where the customers are. How are you feeling about where we are? It's November 2025. We've got hopefully a review and renewal of the USMC on the horizon. We continue to have some issues, but Canadians are still pretty emotional, pretty upset. The elbows are not quite down just yet. But how do we get through this period sensibly as we look forward?
Well, I think the key thing that I'm taking away from this is we had a very cozy life the last 50 or 60 years where our biggest trading partner was our neighbor, and it was a very collegial relationship.
Life was good.
Yeah, life was good. It was a great relationship.
In fact, it was good enough.
Yeah. And I think we as a country got a little lazy. We didn't have to have the most competitive trade policies. We didn't have to have competitive tax policies. We didn't need to stimulate productivity. We could just sell to the global elephant, and life was pretty good. The U.S. is obviously going through a different phase where it's very inwardly focused and looking to recreate its manufacturing base. And we as Canadians need to pivot to that reality. And we need to, number one, get rid of our own provincial trade barriers. The fact that you can't bring wine from BC to Alberta, to me, is a little crazy.
Well, it gets worse than that. Think about the first aid kits you have to prove comply with new provincial regulations, and lighting on vehicles, tire sizes. It truly is something I find very rich when premiers complain about Donald Trump's tariffs.
Yeah.
We've been putting them on Canadians for decades.
Absolutely. And I've heard from people it's harder to sell to Ontario than it is to the U.S.
Yeah. You mentioned the customer base is not just in the United States. It's also very consistent with the diversification policy of this government. But long before, I'm sure you were at it before that. How did you diversify? How did you end up effectively, as I understand, and tell us the story, but you created the market for your product in Asia.
Asia is a net importer of energy. And what keeps Canada from being truly a global player in energy exports is our geography. It is the challenge of getting our product, which is in either Northeast BC or in Alberta, to Tidewater. And AltaGas in 2019 had a great idea. So instead of using pipelines, why don't we use the railroad? The railroad's already there. All we need to do is load the propane on rail cars. Then we need to find a port. And the people back then were able to find an ideal spot in Prince Rupert. And since 2019, when our Ridley Island propane export terminal opened up, we started with exporting about 25,000 barrels a day of propane to Asia. Today, we're doing about 130,000 barrels a day. By 2027, we have plans in place to do 250,000.
The demand's endless at that end.
Yeah. Asia imports 3 million barrels a day of propane. So
why not Canadian?
It's a huge market. It's a huge opportunity for us.
Why was Prince Rupert the right place?
It is a deep water port.
Is it the deepest in North America?
It's the deepest water port in North America, and it has significant rail access to that port.
Right. So I believe there's a desire to see it double. Why?
Yeah, we're building an expansion right now. It's called the Ridley Island Energy Export Facility. It's going to start up in 2027. It's going to add 80,000 barrels a day of exports. We have the ability over time to grow that to 500,000 barrels a day. So we have this huge opportunity in front of us to materially change our trade balance. So what we do today at about 125,000 barrels a day, that's $2.5 billion a year of exports to Asia. By 2027, we'll be doing $5 billion a year. So to put that in some context, Canada exports $500 billion a year. Our little facility is doing 10%.
Wow. Now, it goes without saying, I'm assuming these create more jobs every time you start producing more and selling more.
Yeah, absolutely. There are more jobs because there needs to be activity in Alberta to load the trains. There's more activity in Northeast BC to load the trains. Upstream of that, there's processing plants and fractionation. There's pipelines. There's drilling. And then at the port, we have more rail offloading, ship loading, and then that drives global activity in Korea, Japan, and China.
And your provider, CN, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so they're hiring as well to meet the demand.
Absolutely.
So growth is good. It's not bad, for the record. What advice would you give to just Canadian companies that you've said rightly that it's been pretty comfortable, pretty good run? Many of our companies have been global, in fairness, particularly service providers have been, or those in service industries. But now Asia in particular saying, sell me your stuff.
Yeah.
I want your oil. I want your gas. I want your uranium. I want your potash. I want your rare earth. I want your critical minerals. Just get me more. Fastest growing part of the world, soon to have a third of the world's middle class. What advice do you have for those other Canadian companies who perhaps have either just looked south or looked inside Canada? What does it take to take that leap across an ocean into unknown territory and grow your business?
It's no different than sales of anything. You need to meet people face to face. You need to get out there and tell your story. What I tell the people who sell our product is you gotta wear out the shoe leather. You gotta get out there, you gotta shake hands, you gotta talk to people, and you gotta let them know what you have and why it's a benefit to them. So whether you're selling propane or you're selling a widget, you need to make sure that the customer knows who you are and why it's in their best interest to buy your product.
One of the areas where tremendous progress seems to have been made, particularly with energy companies, is with Indigenous partners. How do you see where we find ourselves today and the opportunities that represents?
That's a great question, Goldy, and that's near and dear to my heart. Historically, energy companies approached First Nations and U.S. Indian reservations in a very transactional manner. Hey, if we're going to come through your community, we'll pay you some money. Let us come through your community, and then we'll go away. And I think the Indigenous people felt that was a little disingenuous. We interrupted their lives. We have assets on their territory, but it was very transactional. We need something from you. Here's some money. What I learned in my career was when I was at Enbridge, I was running the crude oil business, and that pipeline basically runs from Zama, Northwest Territories to Houston, Texas. It's the longest oil pipeline network in the world. And we were trying to build a new pipeline in Minnesota, the Line 3 replacement. And we were kind of stuck. The governor didn't want to give his approval. There were some as in the U.S. you call them U.S. tribes, who weren't super interested in working with us. I was lucky enough to go down to the Fond du Lac Nation and walk the pipeline right away with the chairman of the tribe. And he showed me some areas where we weren't the best neighbor, where we weren't doing things that perhaps were in the interest of that nation. So we had a long talk. We at Enbridge changed how we were going to route the pipeline. We listened to what the feedback we got from the tribe. And then ultimately that tribe decided it was in their best interest to work with us. And they went to the public regulator and testified on behalf and for the pipeline. And ultimately, that's how we got the pipeline approval. And then that made me realize that, hey, we're going to be partners with these people forever. We need to be economically aligned. They need to feel like they own a piece of this. When I got back from that trip and worked further in my career at Enbridge, we came up with the idea that all of the pipelines in Alberta should have First Nations ownership. And in 2023, we did a deal where 23 different First Nations got to own 10% of the pipeline network. And AltaGas has been doing similar things, where we don't just pay for being there one time. We make sure that we offer training and jobs for the First Nations where we touch them. The more product we move through their traditional territories, they get a royalty payment each and every day. And the next thing we need to do is to make them an equity partner in our projects. So that's the next step. And I think what that does is if you're a good neighbor and you're aligned, you both win as the company grows.
Doing good has always been good business, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
I want to go back to sort of your time at Enbridge, and you were clearly a part of the Northern Gateway project. Everybody, I think, knows how that story ended. Not very well, and nothing's really been built without being nationalized since. TMX is an example, although obviously Coastal GasLink and a few other things are coming online, we hope soon. LNG Canada is there. But there must be lessons learned from that. When you look back at that, what do you think could have been done differently, and what can we do now going forward to prevent something like that happening again, where effectively a government retroactively canceled an approved project?
Yeah, that is the biggest challenge for infrastructure in Canada. As a private company, you have not enough certainty that you can get through a regulatory process in a reasonable amount of time and not run the risk of political interference, even if the regulator gives you its approval. So Northern Gateway was approved by the Canadian Energy Regulator, and effectively then killed by the Liberal government. And Enbridge wrote off $500 million. By
the way, did it not enjoy support of the Indigenous groups on that road of the pipeline?
Yes, it did.
Isn't that the most shocking thing? You got the consensus and the quote-unquote social license that you needed, and yet this was the outcome.
And that's why it's hard to build infrastructure in Canada. There isn't certainty that if you do all the right things, you will still get a go. And that it's unfortunate. That's just the way that this society's been, our society's been set up, that we're too worried about the loud squeaky wheels. Like our Ridley Island Energy Export Facility took 7 years to get permits. And it's right beside the existing operating facility. And we have buy-in from all of the First Nations along the route. Even something less controversial takes way too much time.
Do you feel like there's a moment here where finally the facts can be introduced in what it takes to get energy out of the ground and move to markets that are operating coal plants around the world?
The reality is people need affordable energy. They need reliable energy. We want to have more climate-friendly energy over time. And without that energy, basically people are in economic poverty. We'd all take this energy for granted, that to keep our houses warm, to keep us cool in the summer, to drive around, fly on an airplane. So there needs to be a more nuanced discussion about what are we prepared to give up? What can we do as a society to meet all of these different goals? And for me, the thing that we don't ever talk about anymore is energy conservation. We all want to drive these big SUVs. We all want to live in 5,000 square foot houses. Is that really necessary? And if we just roll the tape back to the 1970s, and when we were talking about energy efficiency as a big way to fight the energy insecurity that the U.S. has, that is something that needs to be on the discussion framework, and that's completely missing today.
One of the questions I've been asking CEOs these days with the emphasis on AI is, how is AI affecting their business? Is it having any impact in your business? Do you see it having an impact on your business?
We see a direct impact just on the demand for our product. What's happening in the US and globally is there's an AI arms race, and that arms race is about having enough data centers to providing the computing capacity for all this AI. And the linchpin to a data center these days is energy. And because we're in the energy business, we see customers come to us and ask us, like, how can I get this huge amount of energy that I need to put a data center in place? So if you think about what the hyperscalers are trying to do, so Meta, Alphabet, and all the others, they're all talking about wanting to have in the next 5 years 10 gigawatts each in data center power to enable their data centers. I think New York City on a peak day uses 5 gigawatts of energy. So we're talking about the energy for 20 New York cities just from these 5 companies. So this is a game changer for the energy business. And then for AI as a whole, there's so many possibilities because we are an information-heavy business where we need to be safe and reliable each and every day, and data enables us to be safer and more reliable each and every day. There's tons of possibilities in front of us.
Now, earlier we talked about the courage leaders need today. You did something I've actually not seen, at least not recently, and that is you put out a LinkedIn post during the municipal election that was happening here in Calgary to elect a new mayor and to elect councillors and so forth. And you took to social media and you basically urged people to vote in a very personal message. Why did you do that?
We live in democracy, and like you look at every election, whether it's a federal election, a provincial election, or a municipal election, and quite frankly, the voter turnout of all of these elections is terrible. And then because the turnout is low, fringe interest groups get a disproportionate say in the outcome of the election. So because of voter apathy, in my mind, we see this bigger polarization each and every year in democracy. I think most people are in the middle. Most people want central type policies where you work with both sides of the argument to come up with a compromise that is reasonable. And the past election in Calgary, we saw extremely low voter turnout. We saw a city council that was deeply polarized. We saw that special interest groups were really running our city. And I felt like it was important as a leader in this city to tell people, hey, if you don't go out and exercise your democratic right, you're going to get more of the same, where the special interest groups run our city. We have, in my mind, one of the best cities in the world, but we're not looking after that city. We're too busy worrying about minorities of people when the broader group of Calgarians want a safe and efficient city.
My father likes to say, Canadians are people of the radical middle.
Yeah.
Right? Why do we cross the street? To get to the yellow line, as the saying goes. Now, you and I both talked about our kids. A lot of what we're doing now is really for our kids and setting them up for inheriting a Canada, and that's hopefully stronger than the one that even we got. What's your hope for them as you look forward?
Well, I hope that they have the ability and desire to stay in Canada. What I worry about is if we don't have the right policies and rules, people who are ambitious, people who want to do better than their parents will feel like they need to move somewhere else to live out their dreams. And we've seen such a difference in our economic policies between Canada and the US. We've seen that brain drain for many, many years now. And my hope is that we can turn that around so we can make companies like AltaGas great global companies that are based in Canada.
Well, look, it's been a great conversation. I want to end on a lighter note on a couple of fronts. First of all, you're an avid cyclist. You've been riding in the Enbridge Tour for Alberta for Cancer. Tell me why you do that.
I've been an avid cyclist for probably 30, maybe 40 years now. It happened that a good friend of mine in 2009 was diagnosed with cancer. And he said, hey, I'm going to do this bike ride to raise money for cancer research because I've seen all these things that need to be done with cancer, and we can really make a difference if we can get some more funding for research. So that summer, I trained him up because you were supposed to ride about 250 kilometers over 2 days.
Where'd you ride?
Just south of Calgary in the foothills.
And that puts you at the border, basically, if you're 250 south?
Well, you're getting out there. And he had never ridden a bike before.
Wow.
So I trained him up on what kind of road bike to buy, how much training you needed to do. And then I said I'd do it with him. And so I sent out an email to my friends and asking them for donations for this cancer fundraiser. And to my surprise, is one email I raised $10,000. And from that, I got all these emails back with stories about people's families that had been impacted by cancer and why they were so happy that I had asked them to donate to my ride. And then the year after that, I was asked by the people running the event, would you help organize it for the next year? And I said, sure. And at that point in time, I asked my employer, Enbridge, if they would sponsor it. And then Enbridge ended up sponsoring the ride across Canada in Alberta, Ontario, Quebec, and BC. The event over time has been going on for 17 years now. It's changed names in some of the jurisdictions, but it's raised over $500 million.
$500 million?
Yes.
Wow.
And we've raised $110 million in Alberta. And when I came over to AltaGas, we started a team here. And I'm super proud of our folks. In 2 years, our little team has raised over $1 million. And we started with 2 riders the first year. In our third year, we had 125. So it's great how our company has embraced this weekend, one weekend in the summer to try to make a difference for everybody here in Canada and across the world.
I think it's a proof point of sort of the good-hearted nature of Canadians, but also a reminder to all of us that we can get a lot done together.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, look, the hardest part of the podcast is right now. This is the rapid-fire questions, and we've got a few lined up for you. Tell me the best place to cycle in Calgary.
Cycling from Banff to Lake Louise.
That's God's country, that is. Good answer. I like that answer. Favorite sport to watch?
I'm a diehard Calgary Flames fan.
And is this the year?
Absolutely not.
Can we get past the Oilers at least?
I don't think so.
You may have lost some of our listeners on that one. Favorite place to visit outside Canada?
Tuscany.
Favorite food?
For me, Italian food.
Italian food. Best way to spend a day off and relax in your free time?
Either a bike ride in the mountains or watching my kids play sports.
And what do you like to do outside of cycling?
I'm an avid reader and I'm a closet comic book nerd.
Comic book nerd. Now we have to explore that. Favorite comic book?
That's a tough question. The Avengers.
The Avengers. Is there a favorite superhero of yours that I can wrap up on?
How about Iron Man?
Iron Man. All right. Well, that seems fitting. You are an Iron Man, given the cycling that you do. You've been a great sport here. Thank you for doing this with us.
Thanks for having me, Goldy.
Vern Yu is the president and CEO of AltaGas. Speaking of Business is a production of the Business Council of Canada. Our thanks to Mark Tabalon of ZRM Studios for production help with this episode, and as always, Will McIntyre and the team at Pop-Up Podcasting. If you would like to hear more of our Speaking of Business conversations with innovators, leaders, and entrepreneurs, why not subscribe to our podcast? Search for Speaking of Business wherever you get your podcasts, or go to our website at thebusinesscouncil.ca/podcast. And yes, it's thebusinesscouncil.ca. And please leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, I'm Goldy Hyder. Thanks for joining us.